What is going on, YouTube? So coming back today, second video of the day, wanted to talk about one of the brewing situations, hot seat discussions going on around the country right now on the college football stage. I talked about a few weeks ago the Tom Herman hot seat situation with the Longhorns, including potential replacement candidates or why the Longhorns should part ways with him. And I believe the Tom Herman situation is one to watch moving forward, but at least at the moment, there's two really, really burning, scorching hot seats right now, and they're both in the Big Ten. You got the Penn State, or you got Penn State with James Franklin. They've been bad this season to start. I think the problem with at least buying out James Franklin right now, at least from what I've seen, he's got one of the biggest buyouts in the country, but I don't know the exact dollar figure on it. I believe it's one of the 10 largest, though, at least among the Power Five. And Penn State's got a younger roster, so I feel like if there was one to go right now, it'd probably be Harbaugh over James Franklin. But I want to touch on three phases, similar to how I did the Herman video, but touch on three phases why, because I believe Harbaugh and Herman are two of the very, very few head coaches around the country where 2020 could have actually been a make or break season for them, just because obviously there's so much going on. Everyone uses the 2020 excuse for sometimes bad performance on the field or something to that effect. But I believe that there's warranted frustration with how things are going with Jim Harbaugh. First, I want to touch on just the obvious and the results on the field or lack thereof. Michigan, again, just kind of got, I won't say they got stomped by Indiana, but they got handled pretty good. Their only positive result this season was their season opening win over Minnesota. And I think teams are starting to figure out the strengths of Michigan and the weaknesses pretty fast. So while Indiana is a good team, Michigan State definitely is not. The fact that Michigan could not beat Michigan State, I believe that was last weekend, is pretty embarrassing, especially with the way Michigan State was handled by Iowa this weekend. So Michigan holds a record of 1-2 right now. They would definitely have to win out to be able to have any shot of making the Big Ten championship game, pretty much eliminated from the playoff conversation. Right now, I think their best situation is just to try to get one win. Once again, Michigan running into problems with the passing game. Quarterback situation is not a good one. Joe Milton has kind of taken the reins so far, but they're only averaging about a little over one passing touchdown per game because he's got 4 on the season, 2 interceptions, completing about 60% of his passes. The only other options they really have are Cade McNamara and Hassan Haskins, and I don't know how much better those options are than Joe Milton. But to place all this blame on Joe Milton's shoulders would be looking way beyond the scope of the problem here for the Wolverines. So Michigan's schedule gets really no easier coming up. The Big Ten East can be kind of a gauntlet, especially when that's the only schedule that you have. Their next game up, at least they get it at home, but I don't know how much that's going to help. Comes against a top 10 team in Wisconsin, and they still have Ohio State on the road to round out the regular season. I don't know how easy Penn State's, depending on how Penn State looks at that time. I definitely don't think Penn State and Maryland are going to be easy either. Maryland looked really good against Penn State last weekend. Tulia Tagovailoa looks like a transfer portal steal for the Terps. So again, they looked really good, but I don't ever put any stock into Maryland when they have a hot offensive start to a season because they always go all sorts of wonky after about the first 3 or 4 weeks. So that now brings Jim Harbaugh's total record at Michigan. I believe this is his sixth year. 6th year at Michigan, 48-20. On the surface looks really good. But if you dig a little bit deeper, some of the final results in Michigan have been very, at least compared to preseason expectations, have been rather mediocre. His highest AP poll finish at Michigan was back in 2016. He finished number 10. There's a bunch of finishes at Michigan in the AP poll between 10 and 20. None inside the top 10. And at least last season, number 18, finishing up 9-4. I don't know how much better Michigan's getting in the last couple of seasons. His first year at Michigan, I believe, was back in 2015, and things were starting to look up. He started with 2 10-win seasons, got back down to an 8-win season, But it's looking like he's starting to fill that void between an 8-10 win head coach. And that's just, especially with the amount that he's losing to Ohio State, that's just not going to get it done. And the fact that he's still losing to Michigan State, that's another good reason for fans to just be put over the edge. And that's going to kind of be my final point here for just the lack of on-field results, is losing to Michigan State and Ohio State. Urban Meyer, Ryan Day, they've both been problems for Jim Harbaugh. And even with Michigan State going through kind of a rough patch here the last couple of years, depending on which season you're looking at, they couldn't get it done this season against really kind of young and rebuilding Michigan State program. If you're not getting over the hump just in general, the way to at least get in some good graces for your fan base is beating your rivals. And again, that's just something that Jim Harbaugh has not done on a consistent basis. Kind of splits the deal with Michigan State and really never beats Ohio State. So I want to move on to the second reason here, which is the buyout clause. And usually this is a limiting factor for me. I said this for Tom Herman. His buyout wasn't it wasn't the biggest in the country, but it's still, especially for a lot of schools being in a tough situation during the pandemic, it still ranks in like the top 30 or 35. This was about 16 million. Jim Harbaugh's actually isn't all that big, especially in retrospect to the rest of like blue blood or Power 5 conference head coaches. He ranks outside the top 50. He's kind of right there with Jonathan Smith at Oregon State, Mike Locksley at Maryland, Rick Stockstill at Middle Tennessee. His buyout set around $5 million, which again sounds like a lot, but in retrospect, for some buyouts being in the ballpark of $30 to $50 million at other blue blood schools, that's actually not all that bad. That is something I think Michigan could stomach, especially if there's a fruitful coaching market this offseason, which who knows what that's going to look like. But I think a lot of Michigan fans are already ready to move on from Jim Harbaugh. And then I want to get into my third reason, and this is always the one that I bring up just for the longevity and the future of a program, that's results on the recruiting trail. So Michigan doesn't have a whole lot outside of J.J. McCarthy in their 2021 class that I think you're super worried about losing if you part ways with Jim Harbaugh. The prospect of volatility on the recruiting trail, especially ahead of 5 weeks ahead of the early signing period, 6 weeks, come next month. And I think JJ McCarthy's about it. If you have a firm commitment from him, no matter the head coach, especially if you bring in a solid hire to replace Harbaugh, then you're pretty much good there. Their 2022 class is, again, decent, ranks in the top 10 in the country. They got 3 commits, highest rated, Alex Van Summeren, 4-star defensive tackle out of Michigan. But he doesn't even rank inside the top 200, 247 sports composite prospects in the nation for the 2022 cycle. So again, you're not putting a whole lot up in the air in terms of volatility for the recruiting trail for the next couple of months that sometimes teams will face, that you might get in some other situations. So those are my main 3 reasons why I think the Wolverines should go ahead and just let go of Jim Harbaugh. I don't know if you can find a good kind of interim head coach if you're going to see a whole lot of a dip. There's really not a whole lot of downside to doing it. That's kind of the final point I'm trying to arrive at here is, he already struggles against Ohio State. He already lost to Michigan State this year. Again, you're close enough to the early signing period where if you have a firm commitment from your lone 5-star prospect in the 2021 class, then I don't know what you're really risking. Again, if you're parting ways with Harbaugh, because the buyout's not all that extreme. So anyway, that is pretty much it. I wanted to touch on that situation. I might do something about Penn State, but again, I think that James Franklin's a little bit more firm there than Harbaugh is at Michigan, but both of them are sitting on very hot seats and with good reason. Anyway, that is pretty much it. See ya.